thank you for joining us for Thomson Reuters Talks Financial Crime. I'm your host, Gina Gerva, attorney and manager of market insights, market intelligence, and thought leadership for our corporate and government business at the Thomson Reuters Institute. Well, today we begin with a story of fraud that is sweeping the nation: synthetic identity fraud. Also known as Frankenstein fraud, it is one of the fastest growing financial crimes in the United States and has become an increasing concern for regulators as banks struggle to find common ways of tackling this very innovative theft technique that combines real and fictitious data about individuals. Well, joining me today is security expert Chelsea Binns. Chelsea is the author and editor of numerous scholarly articles and 3 books. Chelsea is an assistant professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, a licensed private investigator, and a certified fraud examiner. She's also the former past president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners New York chapter. Chelsea also worked for many years in the financial services industry and has a lot of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge to bring to this topic. So Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Gina.
So what exactly is synthetic identity fraud? It sounds very nefarious and scary a little bit.
Well, it is. And it's extremely, extremely innovative, which is one of the reasons why it's become one of the fastest growing frauds today. So let me take you through the process. So what happens is a fraudster will combine real and fictitious information to create a brand new identity, one that is real for all intents and purposes. And this is the reason why this type of fraud has a great difficulty in being detected, because there is real information behind it. And not only that, a real person behind it. So if there was a problem with an account, there is someone that can be contacted that will verify that everything happening on it is accurate and correct. So I'll give you an example of how it works. So someone would take, let's say, your social security number. Hopefully this never happens to you. And combine it with someone else's date of birth, someone else's address, someone else's name. So all the information is real for all intents and purposes, but doesn't tie back to any one particular person, just someone that can be contacted to verify that this is a real account and all the activity is true. And what they'll do is they'll open the account, use it as much as possible, establish a good credit, pay the bill, charge small things, pay the bill, get another line of credit, potentially get a credit increase because they're a good customer, get additional funds, use as much as possible, and then close out the account.
Wow, so they're acting. Yeah, and so they're acting like an actual card holder, card user, account holder, paying the bill on time, and then at some point they just stop, I would gather.
Correct.
Wow.
Just disappear.
Is this a recent phenomenon? Like, how long do you think this has been going on?
It is estimated that it may have been going on for a little while, but it's proliferated greatly in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And how is this different than, you talked a little bit about it, but traditional credit card fraud, like in terms of how it works? It's obvious. I think the biggest standout for me is that you're using a bunch of different real people's personal identified information, right, and creating this. And I think my second question to that too is like, how are financial institutions able to combat this better? Like, why are they so vulnerable to this type of fraud?
Right. So traditionally, fraudsters would use their own profile, or they would use a completely stolen identity, like use you for an example again, to take your identity in full. And so these would be more easily caught because eventually you'd be contacted, or somehow it would be on your credit report, or you would get wind of what was occurring. But here, that's not the case. So that's why this has been a lot more challenging. And it's really challenging in the financial industry because bank cards are a preferred medium for these fraudsters. So we're seeing this occurring greatly in the financial services industry because of the fact that bank cards are being used. And so this industry is most targeted.
So what are some notable examples, either from the news or maybe from your research, that you've seen just to kind of help contextualize for this for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, there are a lot, but one recent case that struck me was a case in California, and it was a set of brothers and their wives, And what they did was it was a multi-million-dollar fraud. What they did was they filed, I believe it was about 35 false COVID loan applications and received those funds and made use of them, purchased luxury homes, et cetera, with the money.
Wow, definitely not what it was meant to be doing. Those funds are meant to help people, not buy luxury homes, luxury cars, right?
No, of course not. So, and this case is notable because we're seeing that this is occurring in the pandemic space. So this is another COVID-related type of fraud that we need to look out for.
So, how important is collaboration in the fight to detect and prevent synthetic identity fraud? I mean, you come from the financial institution banking space, so kind of drawing on that background as well, like what can banks do to stop this?
Right, right. Well, there's a couple of things, right? So they say, of course, collaboration is key, collaboration both within the bank itself and then also with other banks and also with technology innovators, right? Really getting a handle on that data. They say some of the challenges, for detection in the financial industry are the fact that we have a classification problem and the fact that we have a detection problem. So the detection problem comes into play where it's very difficult to detect this type of fraud, obviously, because real information is being used and traditional fraud detection systems aren't designed to catch it. So that's one challenge. And then the other in terms of classification is that some banks, or perhaps within the bank itself, are classifying instances of this fraud differently. So some are perhaps calling it a credit fraud, some are calling it a third-party fraud. So we don't really have a full handle on the problem. So it's recommended that we get our definitions together, make sure that everyone's on the same page, especially within the same bank, make sure that this is being classified properly so that we can get some statistics on it. And once we have a handle on the statistics, we can measure the amount of this that is occurring. And it's probably greater than we realize because of the measurement problem. And really studying that data, and then also, again, working with partners, technology partners, collaborating with industry, keeping government abreast of everything that's happening. So public and private sector partnerships are also going to be crucial here. And hearing about the techniques that are being used, hearing about particular data points that are perhaps, for instance, the same social security numbers that are being used so that these can be blocked ahead of time. So I think this type of collaboration will really, really help for us to get a handle on this type of crime.
Incredibly scary stuff. And I think, like you said, the classification is so important. Some of our Reuters journalists have reported out somewhere along the lines of $6 billion have been lost to this, in the US alone. So I'm sure that number is much higher if you take the classification into account. But it sounds right. It sounds like a really just a problem that definitely is going to continue. And I appreciate you taking some time to chat about this with me.
Gina, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. In our next video series, next edition of this video series, we will be talking to Jim Dinkins, who is the president of Thomson Reuters Special Services. Chelsea Binns, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina.